I was also a competitive roller skater and did that for many years. In fact, I still think of myself as a roller skater, even though I don't do that. How do you bring things together? And it's an art and a science. And so, I really feel like my skating background really helps me every day in trying to bring those things together.
This is GraphGeeks in Discussion. I'm Amy Hodler. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Janet Six, an award-winning researcher and former UX Matters columnist, who's now a product manager at Tom Sawyer. I'm delighted that Janet agreed to sit down with us and share a bit about her experience going from academia to the commercial graph world. Welcome, Janet.
Oh, thank you, Amy. I'm so glad to be here.
So Janet, just to kind of kick off, and so our listeners can hear a little more about your background, you have some really interesting history going from the academic world to the commercial world in the graph space. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in graphs and then how you started to make that journey?
Oh, yes, would be glad to do so. So I was a computer science major in undergrad, and I had always planned to go to graduate school and get my master's degree. And I really enjoyed my computer science courses and was able to study graphs, starting with discrete mathematics and then, of course, data structure, algorithms classes. And of course, I was familiar with the concept of graph before, informally through not only schooling, but also just some informal discussions growing up around game theory. It turned out I didn't know it was called that, but around that. And when I was in my fourth year of undergrad, I took a graph visualization course, and it was based on the conference in the field, and we were studying the papers of the leading researchers in graph visualization, and it clicked. It's like, this is what I want to do with my life. I really enjoyed the graph visualization. It's this beautiful combination of mathematics and art. It was just fascinating to me that you could lay out these graph structures in visualizations based on the mathematical qualities of the structure itself. And so, as soon as I took that class, it was, within days that I just knew I had found my thing. It just clicked. And I was able to very fortunately study with one of the founding fathers of the field as well. And so I stayed at the university, and I had been kind of considering the idea of going for a PhD. I'd always been very interested from a young age of research and studying things that people hadn't studied before, and that idea of thinking, getting to think about things very deeply. And so I decided to go for my PhD. And of course, I knew what I wanted to study because I felt such a compelling motivation and reason to go into the graph visualization field. And so that was 30 years ago. I have to
ask, what was your thesis on?
Okay, so I created a tool that had several different types of visualization. Circular layout is what my work is mostly known for. I also did refinement of orthogonal drawings. Mm-hmm. And I did automated clustering of dense graphs and automatic layout of process diagrams as well. And so I brought that all together into a tool. So I was, from the get-go, very interested of going from theory to practice and being able to take this mathematical theory and apply it to real graphs. And I was always interested in working in the industry. I, from the very beginning, wanted to have a research position in industry to help bring some of that technology that's happening in academia, which is very exciting, and bring it to the real world.
And so, is that how you started to move from the academic world to the commercial world, or how did the mechanics of that actually happen?
So our university shared a research grant, a multi-year research grant, actually with with Tom Sawyer Software, where I am now. And so we worked together for years on the research that we had going on in the lab, and also that understanding of what was going on out in industry. So I was very fortunate to work in a group of researchers that had that connection. So that was, I'd say the first step. I was also very active and was very fortunate to have a lot of conversations with industry leaders here, and to understand what are some of the real problems that are happening. So I am from the Dallas, Texas area. And so the university I went to was very close to what they called the telecom corridor. A lot of the North American telecom companies were based just even a few miles from the university, and getting to speak with people out in the industry in telecommunications, and people were talking about, people have, we didn't call them smartphones at that time, but people have computers in their phone. People were arguing about, this is going to happen or not going to happen. It's just amazing all these years later thinking that there was ever any question that we would have computers, in our phones. But being able to have those conversations, both informal and formal, through symposium or our EEE presentations, or just a casual conversation around a cup of coffee, could see that there's great opportunity to bring this research that's happening in academia together with what's going on in industry and make both better.
So I guess since you were always planning on going into industry and commercial, was it as you expected, or what surprises did you find when you started making that transition?
I would say that, mostly it was as I expected. I knew that there were not as many research opportunities in industry, but that didn't worry me because I knew that, I just needed one, one opportunity. So it's, that didn't really surprise me. But I think that, what was surprising was the depth of the customer needs, and trying to define exactly what a customer need was in a structured way, so you could create a technique or use an existing technique for it. I think that was, the biggest surprise to me, making that connection.
So if there's somebody that is thinking about maybe is down the path on the academic career path and is thinking about, maybe I want to try something different, maybe I want to try industry, what recommendations or caveats, tips that you might give somebody who's thinking about it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. So first of all, never stop learning, because there's always new coming up. And there's always new way to apply existing technology, or sometimes very old technology. So that's the first thing. Never stop learning. And the other one I would say is never give up. So here's like, I think, an unbelievable story, but this really happened. So back in the 90s, when I was in graduate school, my secondary interest was AI. And I took as many classes as I could in AI at the university. And I actually had several people tell me, don't do it. It's not determined. You are wasting your time. People, you won't be able to get a job. If you say you're an artificial intelligence, people will look down on you. And somebody actually said, people will laugh at you if they know you're studying AI.
Really?
Yes. And so I didn't listen to them, because I knew that this was very interesting to me. AI was very interesting to me. And I thought that the field was, there was a lot of growth happening there. And it was, anyway, certainly of interest for me. So I went with that passion that I had to study it. And I didn't listen to the naysayers who told me people would laugh at me. So I took as many classes as I could. I kept studying it on the side. I've been studying, I read graph theory books for fun still, all these years later. I read AI books for fun. It's just, so don't listen to the people that are telling you, this is going to be crazy. People will laugh. So, here we are 30 years later, and we see all these wonderful connections between graphs and AI. So, you never know what's going to happen down the road.
Okay. So study what you love and don't give up. But now that you've brought up graphs and AI, I have to ask, what are your thoughts about where we are today in graphs and AI? And then maybe where we're headed, or some future looking as well.
It's a very exciting time. And certainly the rise of LLMs has really brought this potential connection to the forefront. This is not the first work, of course, in AI. There's been a lot of work done, in graph neural networks or geometric computing, as some call it. So it's not new, but it's the application of it. And so this ability to have this natural language type conversation with LLMs and get results that that we can all understand has brought the connection to the main world. The people who are not in technology understand the importance of it as well. So I say that's the first thing. People are excited, but we're just at the beginning of the journey, I think, really, with graphs and what's going to happen with AI in industry. So we're now seeing a rise of agentic workflows. Like, for example, I was at your presentation at the Day-to-Day conference on agentic workflows and how graphs support that. So, in fact, I was just reading a couple days ago one of these books I like to read from. Proceedings from 1998. And it was very similar to where, you read articles now, but people are talking about graphs and agents and all that. So this is it's not a new technology. Agents are not new. Of course, we're improving them. They're always improving. But agent technology in general is not new. It's how you use them. And so, I think that at the beginning of this industry, or at the beginning of this time where we're seeing graphs and AI come together, it's very important to have in mind, how are we going to benefit? So right now we are doing a lot of modeling of systems with graphs, but then what? It's like, for example, we did LLMs. Then what? Well, you need an agent system in order to have a conversation with them, for example. So, let's, I would encourage people to keep following. What are those next steps? Okay, so we have LLMs, we have agent systems, and then what? What are we going to do with that information? And, use either emerging technology or some well-vetted technologies to move forward to have a larger impact with those capabilities.
So it reminds me, and then what reminds me of some friends I have that actually do some stage performances. They get up there and are very vulnerable, but the yes and of improv is yes and. So I've got to ask you, we're talking about graphs and LLMs, graph graph and agentic workflows, causal graphs, and then what? So thinking ahead, Janet, what's your and then what?
Well, I see a lot of interesting things happening in systems engineering, and I'm working with some colleagues that have been very involved with, the support of the new SysML v2 systems engineering standard. And for those who are not familiar with that, there is a way to concretely define models that are used to build airplanes and cars and other, manufacturing systems. And so, in fact, one of my colleagues had a co-presentation recently with Amazon about bringing LLMs and systems models together. So that is certainly something that comes to mind, as and then what is to, improve the construction and modeling and analysis of these very complex system in a very structured way. I think that's part of the and then what.
Fascinating. And I think you're one of the first people I've heard mention the system modeling and graphs as, as the next thing. So that's super exciting. I am going to take us in a little different direction and ask you something that I've noticed. I have several friends that are in the graph visualization space. And graph visualization, and I should say communication, because visualization is a communication technology. What is with I see a lot of connections that are interested in the graph visualization that also happen to be artists or dancers or somehow involved in the arts themselves. What's going on there? What do you think? And I know you have some background too. I don't know if you want to disclose it.
Sure. Yeah, it's certainly curious. I was so interested when you mentioning there's other people, from the arts. So, I in school, math was my best thing. Growing up, math was my favorite class. And, then I started, playing with computers. My dad had his own business and he had, his own computer system and he let me like do a little programming in it. So, I was always interested in like the programming angle, a very technical angle. But I was also a competitive roller skater and did that for many years. In fact, I still think of myself as a roller skater, even though I don't do that now. It's a whole mindset, I would say. I think, I can't speak for others, but personally for me, so I'm in product management and product strategy. And I think of my work like choreography. We have customer needs, we have business needs, we have technology, and weaving those all together in order to reach objectives and goals. That I find that really fascinating about my work. And I feel very fortunate I get to do this every day. Every day I wake up, wow, I get to do this. But I think of it, it's like a dance. It's a dance between those customer needs, business needs, the technology, and then, of course, there's that ugly reality of we have deadlines, we have constraints, on how fast we can build or who's able to develop it. And so to try to bring that it's a lot like a dance of bringing these things together and then presenting these results to the customer, presenting these results to the development teams and the business teams to, in that hope of reaching everybody's goals. And so, I'd say for me, it's that connection of how do you bring things together, and it's an art and a science. And so, I really feel like my skating background really helps me every day in trying to bring those things together.
Wonderful. And now I'm going to have that visual of you in my head forever on roller skates. Would love to see that sometime. So here's a secret, I guess, project hope that I someday would love to do a graph and art exhibit at one of the graph shows. Yeah, all different arts, everything from literature to painting to maybe performance. It would be a lot of fun to do that. So I really appreciate your time, Janet. I would encourage anybody who wants to have a fun discussion about graphs and AI, wants tips on how to go from academic graphs to commercial graphs, and maybe even talk about roller skating, to reach out to Janet. Where can they find you online if people want to reach out to you?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. So actually there's two Dr. Janet Six, believe it or not, on LinkedIn. We actually talked, we were both getting our PhDs at about the same time. So I'm not the archaeologist, I'm the computer scientist.
Awesome. Sounds wonderful. Anything I should have asked, or any one thought that you would like to leave our audience with?
I would just, encourage people to study what is interesting to you, and to keep studying it and keep thinking about how that can bring something to the company that you work with and the customers that you work with. And sometimes you might not see it right away. Sometimes it might come years down the road, but keep going for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Janet. Would love to keep the conversation going, but we'll have to leave that here for now.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate being here today.